I wasn't even supposed to be out that night. I'd made peace with the idea of spending New Year's Eve alone in my apartment, probably drinking wine straight from the bottle and watching reruns of The Office. But around 10:45 p.m., after one too many Instagram stories of everyone having the time of their life, I said screw it. I threw on jeans, a black hoodie, sprayed cologne on my neck even though I had no one to impress, and called an Uber to the first bar that came to mind. His name was Connor. He pulled up in a dark blue Honda Civic, the kind you don't expect to be memorable. I only noticed him because he rolled down the window as I approached and said with a grin, "You're my last ride of the year, let's make it a good one." I laughed and got in. No pressure or anything. The inside of his car was cleaner than I expected. No weird air fresheners or mystery crumbs in the cup holders. Just this quiet instrumental playlist humming from the speakers, something calm and smooth, like lo-fi jazz. His dashboard had a small pine tree ornament hanging from the rear-view mirror, and a half-empty bottle of iced coffee sat in the cup holder. He had dark hair, a scruffy beard, and wore a worn gray hoodie. Nothing flashy, just a guy doing his last shift. But there was something about his voice, warm, relaxed, maybe a little tired, that made me settle into my seat a little more than usual. "You going out solo?" he asked as we pulled onto the street. "Yeah, kinda last minute," I said. Friends flaked. "I got tired of watching other people live their best lives on Instagram." Connor laughed. "Honestly, that's fair. Social media is a scam on nights like this. Half the people at those parties are miserable and just trying to make their exes jealous." "Glad I'm not the only cynic," I said, smirking. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror and smiled. "Nah, you're in good company." There was a beat of silence before he spoke again. "Where you headed?" "Bar downtown. Brady's. You know it?" He nodded. "Decent spot. Gets packed around midnight. You meeting someone there?" "Nope," I said, then shrugged. Just figured I'd rather be out than sitting in the dark at home thinking too hard. Connor tapped his fingers lightly on the steering wheel. "Respect." The conversation drifted for a bit after that. He told me he'd been driving since early afternoon, mostly quiet rides, some drunk couples, a few college kids headed to parties. I told him about my job, graphic designer, freelance, tired of clients who thought Photoshop was magic. We kept talking, and somewhere in there, it stopped feeling like a typical Uber ride. He was easy to talk to, funny in that dry, understated way, the kind of guy who doesn't say much unless it matters. And he listened, actually listened. Not the polite nodding kind of listening, but the kind that makes you feel like your words are landing somewhere solid. At one point, I looked out the window and noticed we weren't headed toward Brady's anymore. Are we taking the scenic route?" I asked, a little amused, a little curious. Connor glanced at the GPS, then back at the road. "You said you weren't meeting anyone, right?" "Yeah, Brady's is going to be shoulder to shoulder, and you'll be stuck standing near a bathroom line drinking flat beer. You mind if I take you somewhere better?" I hesitated. "Define better." He grinned. "Trust me." And I don't know why, but I did. I leaned back, folded my arms, and said, "All right, surprise me." Connor nodded once, like he was already expecting that answer. As the city lights blurred past the window and the clock inched closer to midnight, I realized something I hadn't in years. I wasn't dreading the countdown. I was actually curious. The ride continued for another 10 minutes. I recognized a few streets but couldn't quite piece together where we were headed. We passed closed bookstores, darkened cafes, a few last-minute revelers stumbling between bars. It was all oddly peaceful. The city in that in-between moment where it's not quite midnight, but the whole year is on the edge of changing. Connor kept the conversation flowing. He asked me what the worst client I'd ever had was, and I told him about the guy who wanted me to redesign his website to look exactly like Amazon, but cooler. He laughed so hard he almost missed a turn. When he finally pulled over, I realized where we were. We were by the waterfront, Gasworks Park. Closed, technically, but the parking lot was empty and the city skyline looked incredible from here. with the Space Needle glowing gold in the distance. "You bringing all your passengers here, or am I just special?" I asked, half joking. "You're my first," he said, parking and turning off the engine. "Last two. Like I said, done for the night." "Seriously?" He looked over his shoulder at me and smiled. "Yeah, I wasn't planning to do anything either, but I don't know. You seemed like you didn't want the night to end yet." That made something twist in my chest. Not in a bad way, just unexpected. Nobody had said something like that to me in a long time. "I didn't," I said quietly. "Still don't." "Good," he replied. "Come on." We got out and walked toward the edge of the hill. The wind hit hard, cold and salty off the water, but it was the kind of chill that felt more alive than uncomfortable. I shoved my hands into my hoodie pocket and tried not to stare too long at the way Connor walked a few paces ahead of me, like he already knew the best view. When we reached the crest, he stopped and turned around. "Not a bad place to watch the world reset," I nodded. "It's beautiful." He glanced over. "You do this kind of thing often?" "What? Let strangers drive me to public parks in the middle of the night?" He laughed. "Fair point," I shrugged. "No, but I've done worse. At least this time I can see the skyline." We stood there in silence for a while. I could hear fireworks popping faintly in the distance, like the city was stretching before the final show. Connor sat down on the cold grass without hesitation and patted the spot beside him. I joined him, knees drawn up, staring at the water. A few minutes passed, and then he said, "You always spend New Year's alone?" "Not always," I replied. "Last year, I was at a party I didn't want to be at. Year before that, I made out with someone I barely knew at a bar and ghosted him the next day." Sounds glamorous. "It was the opposite," Connor nodded. "Yeah, I get that." I looked over at him. "What about you, always working?" "Not really. I used to go big. Friends, parties, countdowns, all that. But something about the past few years just shifted. Feels like the older I get, the more I crave quiet." "Same," I said, surprised at how easily the word came out. We shared another moment of silence. This time, it felt heavier, but not uncomfortable. There was something charged in the air. Maybe it was the cold or the closeness of midnight, or just the fact that we were both alone and not anymore. Connor leaned back on his palms, looking up at the sky. "So what are you hoping for this year?" I exhaled slowly, thinking about it. "I don't know, I guess something real, something that doesn't disappear the second it gets hard. A connection, maybe, or at least someone who doesn't flake." He tilted his head toward me. "That sounds honest." "It is. What about you?" Connor's lips parted like he was about to say something, but he stopped. Thought for a second, then, "Same." There was a pause, a flicker of something unspoken between us. "You know," he said, quieter now, "I wasn't planning to say this, but I'm kinda glad you ended up in my car tonight." My chest tightened in that weird way it does when you want something to happen, but you're afraid to want it too loudly. I smiled, not looking directly at him. "I'm glad too." And then, in the distance, we heard the sound. 10, 9, Connor's eyes locked with mine. 8, 7. No one else was around, just us. 6, 5. My heart started beating faster, not because of the countdown, but because of him. 4, 3. He leaned in slightly. Not presumptively, just closer, waiting. 2, 1. I didn't think. I kissed him. And he kissed me back. His lips were warm, surprisingly soft against mine, despite the winter chill. There wasn't anything rushed or messy about it. It wasn't the kind of kiss people do just for the thrill of saying they kissed someone on New Year's. It was slow, intentional, like he meant it. When we finally pulled away, the city was erupting in fireworks. Bursts of light bloomed in the sky, pink and gold and electric blue, and the whole skyline shimmered like it had caught fire. I could still feel the heat of his mouth on mine, even though we weren't touching anymore. Connor smiled at me, a little crooked, a little nervous. "Sorry," he said. "For what?" I asked. I didn't plan that." "I'm glad you didn't plan it," I said. "Planning ruins it." We both laughed. There was something weirdly vulnerable about the moment. Like the kiss wasn't the bold part. It was the looking at each other afterward, wondering what it meant. He turned back toward the water, letting out a breath. That was unexpected. "Yeah, in a good way," I said. "Unless you regret it?" Connor shook his head quickly. "No, not at all. I just didn't think my last ride of the year would end with a kiss on a hill watching fireworks." "I didn't think I'd be anyone's last ride," I said, with a small grin, then added, "Wait, that sounded more dramatic than I meant." He laughed, and it broke some of the tension hanging between us. I liked the sound of it. Genuine, like he didn't laugh out loud often, but when he did, it was real. "You cold?" he asked. I nodded. "Kind of, yeah." Without a word, he unzipped his hoodie and handed it to me. I hesitated, but he nodded toward it. "Take it. I've got layers." I slid it on. It was warm, smelled faintly like pine and something vaguely citrusy. Maybe whatever soap he used. Maybe just him. "Thanks," I said, pulling the sleeves over my hands. We sat for a while in a comfortable silence, watching the last of the fireworks flicker out. The sky slowly returned to its quiet, starless black. The city buzzed in the distance, but where we were, up here, it felt like we'd carved out a little space separate from the rest of the world. After a while, he spoke again. "So, what happens now?" I turned to him. "I don't know. What do you want to happen?" He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes scanning the city like he was trying to stall for time. "Honestly, I want to keep talking. Maybe not rush anything. Maybe get to know you when it's not a holiday." I liked that answer more than I thought I would. "I'd like that," I said. We sat there until our fingers were stiff from the cold and our breath looked like fog. Eventually, we got back in his car. Neither of us said much during the ride, but it wasn't awkward. He played music again, something soft and rhythmic, and I rested my head back against the seat, hoodie zipped up to my chin, letting it all sink in. When we pulled up to my apartment, I unbuckled my seatbelt but didn't get out right away. "So," he said, "can I see you again? Only if it's not in the back seat next time," I said, smirking. "And you let me buy the coffee." "Deal," he said. I leaned over and kissed him once more. Shorter this time, but just as certain. "Happy New Year, Connor," he smiled. "Happy New Year." I stepped out of the car, still wearing his hoodie, and didn't look back until I was at my door. He was still parked there, waiting, making sure I got inside okay. When I waved, he waved back. That was the night everything started. We didn't text that night. No midnight follow-up. No drunken "you up" messages. Just silence. Intentional, respectful, maybe even a little cautious. And that somehow made me like him more. When I woke up the next morning, still wrapped in the hoodie that smelled like his car, and the coffee he never finished, I realized I hadn't felt this kind of peace in a while. No hangover, no regret, just this slow, steady buzz in my chest that didn't come from alcohol or adrenaline, but from something simpler, hope. Around noon, he texted, "Connor, you survived?" Me. Barely. Spent the night dreaming about someone's suspiciously clean Civic. Connor, I should be insulted you think that's the cleanest thing I own. Me. Guess I'll have to investigate. Connor, careful, I might hold you to that. That was the tone of our messages over the next few days. Flirty, but not pushy. Easy. We talked about everything and nothing. Our worst first dates, weird passenger stories from his Uber gigs, my nightmare freelance projects, and the shared joy of canceling plans just to stay in bed and order takeout. By the end of the week, he asked if I wanted to hang out. No dinner date, no trying too hard plans, just a come over and chill invite. I didn't even hesitate. His apartment was on the second floor of a quiet building in Fremont. Nothing fancy, but clean and cozy. When I walked in, the first thing I noticed was the smell. coffee and cedar. The second thing? The fact that he had a record player and real plants, not the fake ones I kept in my kitchen for fake aesthetic. I made pasta, he said, as if it wasn't the most effort anyone had put into feeding me in months. Trying to seduce me with carbs? I asked. Would it be working? I smirked. Definitely not hurting your case. We ate in the living room, knees almost touching on the couch. He put on some vinyl Fleetwood Mac and poured me a glass of wine, even though I told him I was fine with water. And again, it wasn't a date, not exactly. But it also wasn't not a date. So, I said, twirling my fork in my bowl, how many passengers have you brought here? Just the one who wore my hoodie home and never gave it back. I looked down at the hoodie, still hanging loosely on me. I pled guilty. He raised an eyebrow. I was hoping you'd say that. After dinner, we cleaned up together, shoulder to shoulder at the sink. It was casual, domestic, in a way that felt strange, but also kind of perfect. Then we sat on the couch again, this time closer. I don't remember who moved first. Maybe it was both of us at once. But suddenly my hand was resting on his thigh, his fingers tracing the curve of my wrist. It wasn't rushed. It didn't need to be. He looked at me like he had all the time in the world. Is this weird? He asked. No, I said. It's not weird. It's just good. And it was. We didn't sleep together that night. We didn't need to. We just lay there, eventually curled up on his couch, his arm wrapped loosely around my waist. We dozed off sometime after midnight, the record long since stopped, the room quiet except for the sound of our breathing. In the morning, he made coffee, and I kissed him in the kitchen, barefoot and half asleep. It was simple, and maybe that's what made it feel real. After that night at his apartment, things didn't explode into some whirlwind romance. There were no sweeping declarations or urgent texts that said I can't stop thinking about you. But we saw each other again 2 days later, then again that weekend. And pretty soon we weren't really seeing each other. We were just together. It felt seamless. Like we'd skipped the awkward phase entirely and dropped into something easy. Something that made sense. I learned he loved cinnamon in his coffee, but hated cinnamon-flavored anything else. That he listened to jazz when he couldn't sleep. That he kept an extra toothbrush in his bathroom just in case, and not for hookups, but because he hated sharing his. Connor wasn't flashy, wasn't over-the-top romantic, but he was consistent. Every time we made plans, he showed up. Every time I left something at his place, a charger, a hoodie, my laptop, he texted me about it like it meant I was coming back. Which I always did. And he kept driving, even after New Year's, but less often. He told me he'd cut down his hours, started looking into other work, something steadier maybe, something that didn't require being alone in his car every weekend night. It's weird, he said one afternoon while we were walking through Volunteer Park, both of us holding takeout coffees. Driving used to be how I cleared my head. I liked the silence. You don't anymore? I asked. I don't need it as much. Not like before. I knew what he meant, even if he didn't say it. Before long, we'd started spending weekends together like it was second nature. Cooking dinner, watching shows, sometimes just working in the same room, not talking, just existing near each other. That kind of closeness that doesn't require filling space with sound. But I hadn't told anyone yet, not my friends, not my family, and I hadn't asked him if he had. It wasn't shame, it wasn't even fear. It was just something unspoken, a weird, quiet pressure that started to build in the background, the way something hums before you realize there's tension in the room. It all came to a head one night, about a month after we met. We were out getting drinks, just the two of us, sitting at a booth near the window of a bar we both liked. It was a chill spot, low music, warm lighting, nothing that screamed date night, but I could feel eyes on us. A couple glances that lasted a little too long. Maybe it was in my head. Connor was in the middle of telling me about a weird ride he'd had the day before. Some guy who asked to be driven to a taco place, but made Connor go through a car wash first, when I noticed a guy the first knew from college sitting at the bar, Tyler. We weren't close, but we'd had mutual friends, the kind of guy who always acted a little too interested in everyone else's business. He spotted me, eyes widening just a little before that smug curiosity took over. He walked over. "Hey man, wow, long time," he said, hand already halfway out for a shake. I forced a smile. "Hey Tyler," he glanced at Connor. "This your boyfriend?" The table went quiet. I felt my throat close just a bit. Not from panic, but from that old instinct. The one that told you to measure your reaction before you gave too much away. I looked at Connor. He didn't flinch, didn't shift in his seat or look at me for a cue. He just said, calm and without hesitation, "Yeah, I'm Connor." Tyler raised his eyebrows like he'd just found a new piece of gossip to store away. But he played it cool. "Nice. Well, good seeing you." When he walked away, Connor sipped his drink, then looked at me with this half smile. "I hope that wasn't too forward." "No," I said. "It was perfect." I realized in that moment, he wasn't afraid of being known. He wasn't performing. He was just proud to be with me. I wasn't used to that. And that's when I knew this wasn't just some post-holiday fling or rebound from a lonely winter. This was real. After that night at the bar, something shifted. Not in a bad way, but like we'd quietly crossed a line neither of us had named until now. Being seen together. Being named for what we were. That was new, and I was more okay with it than I thought I'd be. A week later, he invited me to his sister's birthday dinner. Now, on the surface, that didn't sound like a big deal. Just a small get-together, he'd said. His sister Ava had a thing for themed birthdays. This one was pasta night, and Connor promised she wouldn't make me wear a costume or anything, but I knew what it meant. Families were a different threshold. Friends could be casual. It could be casual. But siblings? That was stepping into someone's real world. Still, I said yes. When we got there, Ava hugged me like she already knew me. And apparently, she kind of did. Connor had told her about our first ride, the fireworks, even the hoodie I hadn't returned. She teased him for all of it, which he took in stride, only shooting me a smirk that said, "See what I deal with?" It felt good, solid, not performative. Just part of someone else's life. And his family was nothing like mine. They were loud, sarcastic, affectionate in a way that didn't feel forced. His younger cousin tried to get me into a Mario Kart tournament and then accused me of cheating when I won. His uncle kept asking me what freelance design actually meant until Connor dragged him into the kitchen to help with dishes. Somewhere between the second bowl of pasta and Ava putting on a playlist that made everyone groan, Connor slipped his hand into mine under the table. No one noticed, or if they did, no one made a thing of it. When we left later that night, my stomach was full and my face hurt from smiling. In the car, Connor looked over at me and said, "Thanks for coming." "I'm glad I did," I said. "Your family's awesome," he snorted. "They're nuts, but yeah, they mean well." There was a beat of quiet. Then I asked, "What'd you tell them about me?" He looked at me sideways. "That you were the best thing to come out of my New Year's." I smiled. "Smooth," he laughed. "Not even trying to be, just the truth." We didn't talk much the rest of the drive. We didn't need to. His hand stayed on my knee the whole way back. Later that night, lying in his bed, I stared at the ceiling while he slept beside me, one arm draped across my chest. Something in me softened. I'd been in relationships before. Some long, some short, some that blurred the line between casual and serious until everything collapsed. But this was the first time in a long time that I didn't feel like I was pretending, or hiding, or holding back. I'd met him in the most ordinary way, an Uber ride, a last-minute plan, but everything since then had felt like a quiet, unfolding surprise. Like opening a book you thought would be boring and finding a story that felt written for you. And the crazy part? It was only February. By mid-February, Connor and I had established a rhythm. Weeknights apart, weekends together. It worked. I still had freelance clients to juggle, and he was doing fewer Uber shifts, mostly daytimes now, while helping his friend get a detailing business off the ground. It felt like the beginning of something stable, like we were slowly building a life without even talking about it. But stability, I've learned, has a way of making you nervous when you're used to instability. It started with something small. We were at his place, half watching a movie we'd both seen before. He got up to grab beers from the fridge and left his phone on the coffee table. It buzzed. Once. Then again. The screen lit up. "Are we still on for next week?" From someone named Matt. Now, I'm not proud of it, but I stared at that screen a little too long. Long enough to feel something in my stomach, tight and unfamiliar. Not quite jealousy, but close. When Connor came back, I didn't say anything at first, but I must have looked off because he set the bottles down and frowned. "You good?" "Yeah," I said too quickly. Then I added, "You still dating other people?" He blinked, caught off guard. I said, trying to play it off. Not that we ever had the talk or anything. I don't know. Saw a text. Got in my head. He was quiet for a second, then sat back down beside me. "I'm not seeing anyone else," he said. "I haven't since you." I exhaled. But he wasn't done. "Matt's a guy the first used to have a closeness with, yeah. But we haven't talked in months. He asked if I wanted to get a drink next week." I hadn't responded. "Were you going to?" He gave me a look. Honest, tired, a little frustrated, not at me, just at the situation. I wasn't sure. "But if you're asking me now, then no, I'm not." There was a long pause. Then he said, "Do you want to be exclusive?" I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't know, but because part of me was stunned that it was happening, that someone was meeting me where I was without making me guess. "Yeah," I said. "I do." "Okay," he said simply. "Then we are." And that was it. No fanfare, no Instagram post. Just a quiet agreement between two people on a secondhand couch, half a movie left, and 2 beers slowly getting warm on the table. After that, things didn't magically become perfect, but they became clearer. We spent our first weekend away in early March, just a cabin on the peninsula, a rental with spotty Wi-Fi, and a fireplace we couldn't quite figure out. We made pancakes in a skillet with a broken handle, and played card games neither of us remembered the rules to. One night, after a walk on the beach, I caught him staring at me while I changed into a hoodie and sweatpants. "What?" I asked. He shook his head, smiling to himself. "Nothing. Just, you look really good when you're relaxed." I rolled my eyes. "You're such a sap." "Yeah," he said, stepping closer, "but I'm your sap now." And that was the first time he said it out loud. Yours. Spring came quietly. Longer days, softer mornings, and the kind of weather that made everything feel easier. Connor and I were solid now. Still our own people, but part of something bigger than either of us expected when I first got into his car that night. But relationships aren't just made of weekends and firelight. They're built on the in-between moments. The small choices. The quiet understanding that shows up when things get boring or hard. Like the night my laptop crashed before a deadline, and I lost a week's worth of work. I was pacing my apartment, snapping at no one, spiraling into panic. Connor showed up 20 minutes after I texted him. Thai food in one hand, laptop tools in the other. He didn't fix anything tech-wise, but he sat with me while I rebuilt everything, talking me down between every curse word. Or the time he got sick. A real flu, the kind that knocks you sideways. I stayed over 3 nights in a row, making soup. I oversalted and putting cool rags on his forehead while he insisted he was fine. He wasn't, but he looked at me on night 3 with these glassy, grateful eyes and whispered, "This is the part no one posts about, huh?" That was what made us work. Not the kiss under fireworks, not even the hoodie I still hadn't returned. It was the daily stuff, the unseen stuff. Still, I never forgot that first night. So when December came around again, I had an idea. On New Year's Eve, I booked an Uber to his apartment. He didn't know I was coming. He opened the door wearing sweats and socks and holding a glass of wine. Seriously? I held up my phone. You were my first and last ride of the year. Thought we'd bring it full circle. He shook his head, already smiling. God, you're cheesy. You like it. He let me in, and we sat on the same couch, where so many nights had come and gone. He kissed me at midnight again, slower this time, more certain. No fireworks outside, just a quiet neighborhood and the warm hum of the heater. And this time, when we pulled away, he didn't say anything. He didn't have to. We were just two people who'd chosen to stay, who kept choosing. Every day, every ride, every small, silent moment in between. And I never deleted the app, just in case I ever need another ride somewhere unexpected.